Welcome to Hidden History Stories from the Secret City. Glad to have you with us this morning, and I have a special guest with me. I'm Ray Smith, the host, and Keith McDaniel is not with us today. Keith is having a medical procedure. I said he was last time, but he actually has it scheduled for yesterday, and he'll get us recorded soon. Before I introduce my guest, Cameron Reed. Cameron, I'm really glad to have you with me here. But yesterday, I learned that a book that I've been working on with a team of writers is going to be published. It's available on Amazon, and I'm going to show you the book. If I can get everything to work just a minute here. Let's see. Let's do this. Screen. And that. There. The name of the book is Critical Connections. It's about the University of Tennessee and Oak Ridge from the dawn of the atomic age to the present. And Lee Rittinger is a primary author. Al Ekebus, myself, and William Bugg have helped to write this book. And it talks about, with actually a foreword from Lamar Alexander and another one from Homer Fisher. We are glad to have this book out, talking about the introduction of the connection between the University of Tennessee and Oak Ridge over the years, and it's going to be available in June, and it's actually out available now on Amazon for pre-order. So I'm glad that we've got that book out there. Let me stop the share on that just to let folks know. And now, Cameron, let's go to the book that you're about to finish that we want to talk about today about the Manhattan Project.
Well, thanks again. Thanks for having me again. I'm going to be ordering a copy of your own.
Thank you.
That's
why I put it up, so you'd know.
I keep telling my wife that, yes, this will stop expanding at some point.
I understand the dilemma. I mean, we've got more books and we know what to do with.
Someday this will all be hers.
Oh.
And,
that's why she's looking out for it.
Anyway, thanks for asking me back on. And yeah, I've been working on something that's a little different. And if I can show, I'm going to try sharing my own screen here.
Okay.
Let's see how this works. Okay, how about I try that? Okay, so.
You've got it. Yeah, I can see it.
All righty. So the some of your listeners may know from previous interviews, I've published a number of books and papers on the Manhattan Project, and of course, all your listeners will know that it was such a vast undertaking. There's so many aspects to it. I found I was beginning to lose track a few years ago of now where did I have a reference to such and such, or what article was that interesting fact or quotation in. So I began a few years ago, just initially for my own keeping track of things, to kind of start accumulating a document of useful references and sort of factoids on people and places and committees and technical concepts and events associated with the Manhattan Project. And this kind of morphed into what you're seeing here on your screen is a draft, what I now am calling a Manhattan Project Encyclopedia. And I have a contract with Springer for publication, and I'm hoping it's pretty well along. I'm hoping to have the I hope final version of the manuscript ready probably in July. but it's really is kind of an encyclopedia where it's a guide to the people and places and technical concepts and committees and events associated with the development of the Manhattan Project. And if I can have the liberty to just scroll around here somewhat, of course, modern software makes this sort of thing so just incredibly easy to do now once you get the hang of it.
Mhm.
So what I'm going to do is scroll down to a typical, it really is um, a to be laid out in an encyclopedia-like fashion with alphabetically organized entries. But the power of software now uh, makes it so that I can link across entries very seamlessly and to references and figures. And so, for example, I'm up to about 275 pages. There's about 275 references and somewhat over 100 figures
Mhm.
right now. And do if I start going on in professorial fashion, uh, just
It's fine. I understand what you're saying so far.
okay. So, for example, here on starting on the bottom of page 59, we have an entry for Enrico Fermi's CP1 Chicago pile, the first nuclear reactor to achieve a self-sustaining chain reaction. And if you're seeing this, anywhere there is a something in a red box, that is a hot link to
Mhm.
another entry.
Okay.
So a reader that gets buys the electronic version will see these red boxes and can click, and it will, as you bring your cursor over that, it will highlight that corresponding other entry. So, and I can click on that and be taken directly for the entry to Enrico Fermi.
Okay.
And so one can flip around to figures. Um, where did we go? It's easy to get lost.
I was going to say
Okay,
you have to keep up with where you were.
yeah. Um, and so one can link to figures. And so in that entry for Enrico Fermi, there would be links to some of the other usual suspects of the Manhattan Project, like Arthur Compton,
Mhm.
or the Metallurgical Laboratory at the University of Chicago, Hanford Engineer Works, X10, of course, in
Right.
your neck of the woods.
Uh-huh.
And all of these things can be interlinked. There will be hot links to websites. Uh, and let me scroll down a little bit here.
So wait, before you leave that, let me ask you a technical question. As you're scrolling down to the last sentence there, it says when Trinity test bomb was detonated, it should be the, not he, or is it he? He estimated, oh, you're right. He estimated it to
Yeah.
yield a way of a very simple experiment. Now, you then say C, and there's what looks to be a hot link.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have your cursor on it, it's not hot. Ah, maybe, maybe it is.
Yeah. So if it linked to a document, which I presume you're seeing.
No, I'm
um,
not. I'm still seeing
oh,
the same
okay.
thing we were talking about
Oh, I think what happened here, when I click on it, it comes up
in
because I have it
in a new window.
in a new window in my, because I had
Okay,
my Safari mail up.
I got it. I understand. I
Um,
understand. So that's okay. All right, that's fine. Now move. You can just go ahead then,
okay. And of
because I
course,
understand how that's working.
anybody could cut and paste that into a browser
Yeah,
and get to the relevant document.
got
Uh, Within this document itself, you'll see references that occur at the end of the document. So
Okay.
I wanted to give a kind of now, of course, anybody could look up any of these things online, but I
Mhm.
wanted to, as is the way everything is done these days, but I wanted to have one coherent document where a reader could bounce around and also link to if somebody simply goes online to the Manhattan Project, it can just be overwhelming um, with
Yeah.
so many sites and references. And so I wanted also to have a tabulation of references that are credible places to start. If somebody wants to dig into some particular topic in more detail. So I just began accumulating these things, and it sort of built up over time, and is sort of uh, gelled into this document. And so there's a lot of cross-linking. I hope will be the real uh, kind of power of this. It'd be like kind of like an online encyclopedia where somebody can cross-link between topics and references and figures. And so it goes from literally, I guess, from A to Z. And there's 3 chapters in total. And if I can whiz back up to the top here. So there's a preface that sort of tells the reader what's going on.
Mhm.
Um, some primary sources like government documents and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and chapter 1 is an overview of about 10 pages or so that so what I had in mind here is, we'll say there's a journalist or a student who has heard about the Manhattan Project, but is not really sure maybe of the overall idea. So there's about a 10-page introduction that starts with some basic high school concepts of atoms,
Uh-huh.
uh, the idea of what an isotope is, notation that they might encounter, and then very quickly moves on to how nuclear fission came to be discovered, and a cartoon representation of a fissioning
Mhm.
nucleus and neutrons flying off. And so how it came to be appreciated that a chain reaction could start, and some of the early work in 1939 and 1940, because of course it wasn't just I think sometimes there's a concept that, well, there's a couple of guys sitting around the coffee pot at Los Alamos or Oak Ridge
Yeah.
deciding they could make an atomic bomb. And it, of course, there's much more background than that.
Yeah.
So some of the a section on, okay, how did it come to be appreciated that, uh, hey, this might be a way of making ultimately either power in the form of a reactor
Mhm.
or an explosive device. And of course, both came to be utilized. So this first chapter describes how a chain reaction can be maintained, either explosive or controlled, and how the idea of a reactor would lead to plutonium as a possible parallel route to a bomb, breeding plutonium in a reactor, and how in the summer of 1942, the Army's Manhattan Engineer District was formally established to fund and take command of this business, and leading to the large-scale factories in Oak Ridge and Hanford, and the laboratory at Los Alamos, excuse me, with Groves and Oppenheimer. And some of the locations of some of the major sites around the country, and how this led then ultimately to Little Boy and Fat Man and the Trinity test. So it's to give a very so what I call the Reader's Digest condensed version overview of the Manhattan Project, and how it sort of went into bifurcated into the uranium and plutonium programs, and which resulted in the two different bomb designs in 1945, and then ultimately the Trinity test and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it gives a very condensed survey of the Manhattan Project without trying to go into all the nitty-gritty details. And the guts of the book itself is chapter 2, the Encyclopedia part itself. And so there's a few numerical entries at the start, such as the use of the number 25 to designate uranium-235, and 28 for 238, and 49 for plutonium. So there's a very few numerical entries at the beginning. 509th Composite Group for delivering the bombs. And then we start in with there's a few arcane things like alpha N reactions, meaning a type of nuclear reaction. But then we start in with the A's, and on it goes. So there's committees and technical definitions and people and places, and I've tried to get as many relevant cross links as I can. So it's not going to be airport reading.
I understand. It quickly gets you into the details of the Manhattan Project, and specifically into those areas that would come up, but would not likely be explained. And I appreciate what you're doing here, in that when you bring up something new, you're putting the hot links to where you can go into detail on any of the aspects you want to. Let me ask you a question about one. Back up to the page that showed the 25, 28, 49, 100. Whoa, there you go. I'm aware of the 25 and using the last digits, and of the 49. I'm not aware of the 28. This is the first time I've seen that it was used to designate uranium-238.
Yeah, just exactly an analogy. I presume you can see my cursor flitting around here.
Yeah, I can, yes.
Yeah. So from the 2, from the atomic number for uranium,
Yeah.
92, and then the 8 from the mass number, the total number of neutrons and protons. So so for the isotopes they had to deal with, they had this numerical scheme of I guess they were to serve as code words. But I suppose one could even include some things like Neptunium-239, which would be 39, and some things like that.
You could keep going with this, huh?
You could get the whole periodic table after a while.
I hear you. At any rate, the fact that in was included is just a new bit of information. I talk a lot about 25 and 49, especially when I talk about what K25 might have originated using that 25 for uranium. But I'd never seen anywhere where the 238 had been referenced as 28.
Yeah.
And then the 100-ton test, that's an interesting one that was concluded, uh, let's see, on about May the 7th,
Hmm.
45. Okay. That's a new one too to me.
That's so that's right at the end of the war in Europe,
Yeah.
within a couple of days of the end of the war in Europe, and that was basically a rehearsal test conducted at the Trinity site in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And it was to so they detonated 108 tons of can you imagine this stack of dynamite?
Yeah.
Literally, it was.
Thinking how big. Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
no smoking permitted, one would imagine. Um,
Oh my goodness.
so they stacked up these crates of high explosive on a tower, and it was about 800 yards from where the Trinity
Right.
tower would be erected, and they were setting this up to calibrate instruments, and uh, the even the height of the detonation was dictated by what they were expecting from the Trinity test, which was they were estimating they were going to get about 5 kilotons.
Yeah.
So they had set instruments at scale distances to calibrate them in advance of the real test, and but it ended up that the real Trinity test was much more powerful
Mhm.
than was being predicted, and so a lot of the instruments ended up overwhelmed in the real test. Um, but they had instruments for measuring, sound waves and seismic effects and brightness and all kinds of things. And they even they spiked this 100-ton test with tubes containing fission products from a Hanford fuel slugs to get some sense of how the radioactivity might disperse itself.
Hmm. Wow.
And there's entire books there. There's extensive literature on this,
Mhm.
on the Trinity test. Oops. So there was all kinds of interesting, and there was a an aspect of that that was interesting that just occurs to me was that it turned out that in May uh, in southern New Mexico, the weather was perfect for this sort of thing, as opposed to a couple of months later. Uh,
July.
they were getting all these rain and thunderstorms and whatnot.
Right. Mhm.
um, so it's yeah, there's all these obscure things that, of course, if your listeners have seen the Oppenheimer movie, there was a lot of things that couldn't go into, in a 3-hour movie.
Right. Although, yeah, 3 hours seems to be a long time, but like you say, there's a whole lot that just could not be included. And of course, the movie is about Oppenheimer,
Yeah.
not necessarily nor primarily about the Manhattan Project.
Hmm. So I've tried to include cover the ground as much as I could. So, for example, a physicist reading it isn't going to need to know, what is meant by a fissile isotope.
Right.
But on the other hand, say there can be so many committees attached to the Manhattan Project. You have the Uranium Committee and the Technical and Scheduling Conference and the Top Policy Committee and uh, the for kind of non for policy people, they might be familiar with all these committees.
Mhm.
Uh, Physicists, not necessarily so, and on the reverse for some of the technical definitions. So I've tried to, I guess, cover both the, the technical and qualitative aspects. For example, the Military Policy Committee.
Yeah.
So there was all of these layers of what's remarkable to me is all of these committees, they were really staffed by people who knew what they were doing.
Well, that's it. That it is an interesting combination of people being pulled together, and you have to give General Groves credit for a lot of that. Of course, Oppenheimer too on the scientist, but even earlier when they were forming these committees, I mean, Vannevar Bush and
Mhm.
others were very astute in who they put on these committees.
They were, and some of them had people like representatives from outfits like DuPont or General Electric that ended up having to deal with the nitty-gritty engineering of all of these things. That these guys had the experience to know how to run this sort of project. So that's kind of what I've been involved with for the last heaven
Oh,
knows. And
no.
one kind of aspect that I bumped into was particularly with the people involved. Uh, where do you cut it off?
Mm,
Um, because there was so many. How far down the chain do you go?
yeah.
And so I tried to get all the major players. I'm sure somebody could argue that, oh, why didn't you include so and so?
And I'm sure that's the case because there were so very many people who were involved. I mean, it literally was a national effort. And when you look at the total number of people who were employed in one fashion or the other during the Manhattan Project, you quickly get up to numbers in the hundreds of thousands of people
Hmm.
involved. So the fact that you have to cut it off at some point and say, this person I'll include and these half dozen others will not get included. I think that's a filtering system you've used, and someone like yourself will include more people just because you're aware of it than
Yeah,
included in other research. So I think that makes this encyclopedia a very valuable tool for researchers. I'm very proud to see that you're doing it and
I
the way
hope.
you're doing it.
Yeah, I hope that's the intent, that it becomes uh, not something somebody's going to read from cover to cover, but a handy reference.
Yes.
Um,
And
that
and the fact that you can get from here to something you do want to read in detail. I think that's a key too of you of the way you've laid it out. And as you mentioned at the very beginning, the technology is such now that you can do this online and quickly move from one reference to another reference, from a figure to the details behind the figure. And again, it wasn't available just a few years ago. So what you've been able to put together here is capable now, and has not been in the past.
Yeah, can you imagine if, well, maybe it is, if we had the Encyclopedia Britannica in a
It,
cross-linked electronic fashion? Wow.
and I'm not sure that's not out there. I haven't looked
It,
for it
yeah.
lately. I
Um,
don't have the books in the shelf anymore.
if you're now, will your listeners be seeing this?
Yes, they will.
Oh, okay. If anybody's interested in some of the arcane details, I can, let me try here. Are you seeing a bunch of code here?
Not yet, and I'm still seeing the picture of the Enola Gay.
Oh, new share. Okay, here we go. There we go.
Yes, there you are. I see the
Okay.
code now.
So this is what and for, probably a lot of your listeners will be familiar with a software package called Tech. TEX. The X is supposed to be the Greek letter chi.
Oh,
But it's a very powerful software system, particularly for setting up mathematical equations and doing this kind of cross-linking. So if this just probably open to the last place uh, I was at here, and I will emphasize. Let me just so your listeners can see how this works. To begin a new entry for the encyclopedia, you define it as an item, and
okay.
that tells this software, oh, you've got a new entry going on here. This particular one for Richard Feynman.
Mhm.
And then you can give an item a label,
Right.
and the label can be whatever you desire. I could use ice cream as the label
I
for,
see. Mhm.
for Feynman. And if I want to refer to that item anywhere else in the text, uh, you use it in the form of a so-called hyperreference.
I see.
And so that tells the program, I mean, the people that develop this software, the real heroes of this stuff, I don't know how they did this. This tells the software, oh, you're making a link here to the entry for John Wheeler, and the part in curly brackets is the text that will actually appear in the link.
Mhm.
So it will tell it, go to this label uh,
Mhm.
and insert that text. And so the text could actually differ from what the label looks like.
Yeah.
It took me a little while to get the hang of this um, when I was first getting used to it. But then after you get the hang of it, it really becomes almost second nature
Mhm.
in setting these things up. And if you are referencing, whoops, if you're referencing uh, a citation, and I'll get to the bibliography at the end.
Mhm.
Here is one. This will tell the software to, insert a link here to this particular reference. And then thousands of lines later, there's a bibliography
Okay.
where each reference gets a unique label.
Mhm.
Excuse me. And then you can refer to that label wherever you want, even across chapters, uh, as frequently as you desire. So and so that makes it easy to just add in new ones wherever you want. Uh,
It's, yeah, it seems like a very simple yet comprehensive approach to laying out just what you're trying to do. So it seems like a really good fit.
yeah, it was. I've mostly used it for technical stuff, making equations and whatnot. Uh, and I knew it had this capacity, and it like any sort of new software package, at first it's a little overwhelming.
Mhm.
But I began by just making some trial entries, a few trial entries, uh, and practicing with getting the links proper. Originally, all this was in the form of a Word document. Uh, but then when I got the hang of, oh, okay, this is how I can make the links and the references, I could just do a lot of cutting and pasting to to build it up. And what I found was, if any of your listeners undertake such a project, uh, what I found was a fast way to proceed was knowing I was going to have about 300 separate items.
Yeah.
I set up the item definitions first, all of them with no text, so that then when I went back and began filling in the text, the labels were already there to cross-reference.
Mhm.
So as I built it up, I could check as I went along that, okay, things are getting set up correctly here.
Right, so start with your items first is what you're,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's similar to setting up an outline, but it's the main things that you're going to be referring to as you're going out throughout the document.
hmm so it was a learning experience, but as I began to get into it, I just got more and more appreciation for the people that set this up.
Mhm.
It's it's got the software has different sort of document classes. There's even document classes for setting up poetry, if that's what uh, you could do an entire novel this way.
Oh my, it does seem to be a well established doc or software package. And the name of it again?
Is tech, capital T, lowercase e, and then a kind of a scripty X. The best thing about it is that if you can see the top of
Yeah.
the
See,
TEX,
read dash chapter 2.tex. Uh-huh.
yeah, the best thing about it is that it's free and open source.
Ah, good.
And
Okay.
so a few years ago, somebody had, when I was first learning this, and I asked somebody, well, which compiler do you use? And oh, it Tech Shop is the one I downloaded.
Okay.
But there's various ones out there, and even so a lot of journals will use this, and they'll all have their own templates
Hmm.
that you can sort of import and to set up for their particular formats.
I see.
So I will go back to, where were we?
All right.
Oh, there. Okay. It's easy to get lost with all these screens.
Yeah. You're back to the Enola Gay photograph now.
Yeah. So, and it will even help detect your spelling errors,
Oh, we need all the help we can get there, don't we?
which I'm sort of notorious for that. So,
Yeah, me too. And spell check doesn't always select the word that I would like for it to check.
yeah.
Oh, so you need
I've,
to read it again.
I've often wondered if one could go back in time to 1945 with a computer and show this to the guys at Los Alamos.
Yeah, it would blow them away. They
Um,
they had to hire a lot of people to do a lot of handwork to get things done that you've got software today, you just click on it and it's done.
I
So
wonder, even at that time, making a copy of a document.
yeah,
Uh, I don't know how they did that.
well,
I,
I'm
I
I'm
don't
not.
know if,
Do you remember the
oh,
typewriters and the layers of copies you could provide in a typewriter?
I guess that and I remember from high school, the old mimeograph machines.
Right, yeah, you could produce
Um,
copies with a mimeograph machine.
yeah, uh, because
Carbon copies is what they call that
mhm, yeah,
process on the
um,
typewriter. No,
but it,
no, I mean, you can't imagine doing the kind of work that you're doing with the tools that were available prior to what you're using now. I mean, the thing that you're using now makes it capable of being done and done.
mhm. And yet there were encyclopedias and dictionaries.
But you had to go open them up and look.
Open them up. How
You didn't
quaint.
didn't have Grammarly to help you.
Yeah. So I
Well,
guess we're spoiled. We're
I
spoiled.
really, yeah, I'm really impressed with what you have put together here. It's an enormous amount of work, yet you've made it using that software and the tools available to you today. You've made something that I think is going to be an excellent reference
Oh,
because those of us who are looking for this kind of information are often frustrated by how many different places we have to go to find the details that we are looking for. And to have one source that has pulled so many of them together and made the hot links, that is just astounding. I'm really pleased.
oh,
And you
thank you. And that
promised
was,
I'll have it by next month, right?
I hope so.
Right.
And that was the motivation that I got tired of, oh, damn, where did I have that reference? And where did I get that from? And of course, it's almost bottomless. It could, such a thing could go on forever.
Well, and that is the point. Although you're going to publish it coming up next month, there's not an end to it. You can continue to add to it as you go along.
Yeah. It'll probably appear, I hope, sometime later this year after the publisher gets their hands on it. And
Oh yeah, the process will slow down when you get
yeah,
that involved, but I think that's necessary and it's understandable.
and I guess, I mean, nowadays, of course, I just transmit to them all the electronic files.
Right.
Uh, and there, I think they might want to set it as a 2-column book or something like that.
Yeah.
They'll finesse it and make it look pretty.
Right. Yes,
Uh,
and they understand what makes it more readable or more comfortable to the reader.
mhm.
And they'll set it up that way. I'll make you an offer if you want a beta tester. I'll be glad to do it for you.
Okay, I can send you the current incarnation.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to play with it and see if I can find any misspelled words.
Oh, sure.
Oh man, I've given up. When I look on the internet now and I find something, I say, "Oh, look at that," and then I wonder who wrote that, and then I find an error in it, and I say, "Oh no, it was me."
I think something we're going to see more and more of, and this is sort of tangential, but it's something a friend had brought up to me, is uh, AI programs are now getting
Yes.
more literate, I guess, for lack of a better expression. Uh, we're going to start seeing more and more stuff generated by these programs. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think the prospect for more garbled information as a result.
Well, they're only as good as what they're programmed and referenced to go
Yeah.
and. But I'm amazed at what, for example, Chat GPT is the one that I play with mostly, and it can do something instantaneously almost.
Mhm.
That is, I mean, if you say, write me a summary of the Manhattan Project, it'll instantly provide that for you.
Yeah.
Now, you may
You
find
know.
that it's not complete, but it will be generally
Mhm.
uh, comprehensive, and it's amazing to me how much you can get. And right now, when you go and are browsing and looking on the internet, you're getting AI information fed to you,
Yeah.
and
Um,
it's fast changing.
it's this is a problem. I'm still teaching some classes, and both my wife and I are seeing this, that if you ask students to write a paper or something, 500-word essay on thus and such,
Mhm.
well, um, you can you can tell that, okay, a human being didn't write this. It has that
Uh,
slightly homogenized version to it, but uh, this stuff's going to get better and better.
yeah,
And
and if Keith were on here with us, Keith is teaching in a high school as a high school teacher now, And he will tell you that when he is working with his students, he's teaching videography and how to create scripts and those sorts of things. And when he's doing that, he's watching what they're doing simultaneously. He has a setup in his room where he can do that. And he's seen that AI component being utilized. So what he has done is he has said, one of the things he's done is he said, okay, get your AI and start with that, but then go in and verify what it is that the AI has said and find additional information to add to it. So it jump starts the process, but it's not the end product.
Yeah, I think that's the way we're going to have to utilize it, and using it as an entry into the literature is is the way to go.
Right.
Um,
And again, it's just software. I mean, it's just based on, it can do searches quickly and it can pull information together quickly.
mhm.
I have fun with it when I really want to show someone who has not been introduced to AI and I want to get their attention. I will tell Chat GPT to write me a witty poem about that person, and I'll give it a couple of tidbits like where they're from or what they're interested in. And that's about all it takes. And you'll get back about a little poem that's, it's 3 or 4 paragraphs long. And it will use their name and it will tie them to their occupation. And it will say things like, how great they are at such and such, or how much they have done to add to the history of whatever. And it's always very positive in its result. People will read it and say, "Oh, I like that."
Hmm. Wow.
So it's a fun thing to do.
Um,
Well, listen, I'm really
yeah.
glad that you've been with us today and that you shared this uh, enormous work that you've got going. And go ahead and stop the share on your screen, if you would. And
Uh,
unless you've got something else that you wanted to
no,
show, and I
oh,
don't mean
there
to
we
cut
go. No, there we go.
you. Right, good. But I do appreciate what you're doing and look forward to seeing the final product. And I'm very serious about doing beta tests for you. I'd love to have a hold of that and just play with it. And
I've
if I can give you any ideas of
yeah. It
how a viewer uses it, I'd be happy to do that.
it does include tube alloy, as we
Oh,
talked about before.
yeah, we did. Absolutely.
There's
Uh,
certainly entries Y12 and S50, K25, Oak Ridge itself,
well,
tube alloy, nickels. Of course,
good.
Colonel Nichols appears in there, um, and some of the contractors like DuPont.
Yeah. Mm,
So
very
I've often thought a kind of an ancillary project would be if one could have a kind of an online library of essential Manhattan Project documents, because they're all out there, of course. The minutes of the Target Committee meeting, the Compton Committee reports, and just to have a kind of a pretty comprehensive collection of those in one place
That would be a valuable
could be
resource.
useful.
It would be very useful. I don't know that that's been done either. Maybe that's your next project.
Yeah,
You're going to need something to do when you
I
finish.
guess keep me out of trouble, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, Cameron, we'll have you back on when you get it published and are ready to go, just to let people know that it's out there. And
Okay.
if you do start that next project, keep in mind, we'll give an update on that as well.
Okay. That'll be number
Uh,
357 on the list.
Got it. I
Yeah.
understand. and your wife is editing the list all the time.
Yeah.
You told me earlier that you were planning to take a little vacation. I wish you well in that.
Oh, thank you.
I know where you're going, and I think you'll enjoy it. As you've been there before, obviously, it's very
Mhm.
wonderful country, and uh, we'll look forward to. I'll look forward to getting a copy of what you've done so I can start playing with it. And thank
Okay.
you again for being on here today, folks. We're going to have our next session is going to be uh, working with the Manhattan Project National Historical Park, and Nikki Nichols, who is the manager of the park in Oak Ridge, and Linda Albrecht, who is the Department of Energy representative for the park in Oak Ridge. They will be our guests on our next one. And then I've also got lined up a great grandson of John Hendricks, Dennis Aislinger, is going to talk about a book that he's just finished called The Prophet of Oak Ridge Revealed. And he's done a good bit of research about the John Hendricks story. And I think it'll be good to get him on here as well. So those are the kind of programs that we've got coming up. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.